Hello and welcome to Nkumas Online Academy. In today's class, we want to look at what we call ecosystem. Ecosystem. Ecosystem simply means the totality of the living and non-living things in an environment. Of course, I believe you already know what a living and non-living thing is. So when we come to an environment and we take the number of all the living and non-living things in the environment, we call it the ecosystem of the environment. Everything that we have in the environment, including the air, including the water, including the animals and plants, and also the microorganisms that are in the environment. Combining all of them together is what we call ecosystem. Ecosystem is made up of two components or two cadres. There's one we call the biotic component and another one we call abiotic component. So ecosystem, we have two components, biotic, two components. We have biotic, and abiotic. When you hear biotic, it is from the word biology, which means life. Abiotic means without life. So the biotic components are the components of ecosystem that are living. So it comprises of the living organisms in the environment. That is the biotic component or the biotic factor in the ecosystem, while the abiotic factor comprises of all the factors or the things that are not living in the environment. That means that the biotic components, which are the living things, include the plants, the animals, and the microorganisms in the environment. That comprises the biotic factor, the plants, animals, and microorganisms. Microorganisms are tiny organisms that we cannot see with our naked eyes. We need microscope to see microorganisms. So these three factors or these three things make up the biotic factor or the biotic components in the ecosystem. While the abiotic factor includes factors like the climate, the temperature, the humidity, and every other thing that affects the biotic or the animal, the plants, and the microorganisms in the environment. So the abiotic factor are in the environment to influence the biotic factor. Like the temperature is there in the environment to influence the plants, the animals, and the microorganisms. So these biotic factors or the biotic components, they change due to the changes in the abiotic factor. When the temperature of an environment changes, you find out that the plants and the animals and even the microorganisms in the environment will also change. They will change their nature. When the humidity also changes, these biotic factors will also adjust themselves to suit with the new environment. And also other abiotic factors in the system, like air, like even the water, all of these components are the abiotic factors. So under abiotic factors, we have air, we have water, we have temperature, we have humidity, and many other things. Any other thing that you can think of that is not a living organism and is found in an environment is an abiotic factor or abiotic component in the environment. Now let's look at the biotic factor or the biotic component in detail. The biotic component, which is the living organisms in the environment, we have three components or groups in the biotic components. Three groups in the biotic components. And these three groups represent the way energy flows in the environment. You know, it is energy that sustains life on Earth, or it is energy that sustains the living or the existence of everything on Earth. So this energy, it has a way of transforming, moving from one form to another. And one interesting thing is that energy does not, it cannot be created and it cannot be destroyed. So the same energy that is given to Earth from the sun, the primary source of energy to the Earth is sun. So the same amount of energy given to us from the sun is the same energy that will be circulating. So it does not get destroyed, a new one does not form. So what the earth does or the ecosystem does is that it moves the energy from one form to another form. So you will eat, when you eat food or you eat a plant, you collect energy from the plant, and then when the maybe an animal, maybe a cow eats plants, it will collect the energy from the plant, and when the cow dies, microorganism will decompose it and collect the energy from the cow, and then the microorganism will be fed by other organisms, and the energy keeps recycling just like that. So it will be moving from one organism to another organism, and that is what we call trophic levels. The movement of the energy from one form or from one level to another level. So that form the groups in the biotic factor. So the groups we have in the biotic factor are the groups in biotic factor, groups in, or let me say the biotic factor, biotic factor, or biotic components. Okay, so the groups we have in the biotic factor or the biotic components include number one, what we call the producers. Number two is what we call the consumers. Number three is what we call the decomposers. So these are the three groups in the biotic factor, and they make up the three trophic levels: producers, consumers, and decomposers. Trophic level shows the movement of energy in the ecosystem. So the energy moves among these three groups: the producers, the consumers, and the decomposers. Now, what are the producers? The producers are the living organisms in an environment that do not depend on other organisms to obtain energy. They make their own energy. So they don't eat other organisms to get energy. They make their own energy from either the sun or chemicals in the environment. That is how the producers produce their own energy or their own food when you are talking about energy, you are also talking about food, because it is food that gives us energy. Without food, you don't eat or you don't have energy. So whenever we are talking about the movement of energy in biology or in science, we are talking about the movement of food. Movement of food is the same thing as movement of energy. So the producers are mostly plants. Mostly plants, because plants, they can get their own energy from the sun. The plants, they have a way of transforming the sunlight energy to get their own food, carbohydrates, which is the normal food for, or the normal food that gives us energy. So plants get their energy or their carbohydrate directly from the sun. They don't have to eat animals and they don't have to eat plants to get their own energy. So since plants can make their own energy without eating other microorganisms, they are called producers. They are producing energy. That is why we call it or call them producers. They are producing energy, or the primary source of energy. Now, we have two types of producers. We actually have the one we call phototrophs. Types of producers. Producers. In producers, we have two types of it. We have number one, phototrophs. Phototrophs. And we have number two, the one we call chemotrophs. Chemotrophs. Phototrophs are producers that get their energy from the sun. So they use sunlight energy and convert it to carbohydrates or their own food. While chemotrophs are producers, these are normally microorganisms that convert simple chemicals in the environment to their own food. They don't eat microorganisms, they don't eat other organisms, other living organisms. Instead, what they do is that they convert simple chemicals in the environment to obtain their own energy. Like they can break carbon, there is an element we call carbon. They can break organic compounds or carbon to get their own energy. They can also utilize hydrogen sulfide, and they can also utilize what we call methane. These are very simple chemicals. They can break these simple chemicals up to get their own energy without eating other living organisms around them. So they are called chemotrophs. Chemo from chemical. They get their energy from chemicals around them. While phototrophs get their energy from the sun through the process we call photosynthesis. So the process by which the chemotrophs get their own energy from the sun is called photosynthesis. That is to say, since the plants are the ones that get their energy from the sun, then plants plants actually possesses the photosynthetic ability. That is the ability to get their own energy from the sun. So they undergo photosynthesis. While the simple microorganisms that are chemotrophs, the process by which they get their own energy is what we call chemosynthesis. So note the difference between photosynthesis and chemosynthesis. Photosynthesis occurs in plants, while chemosynthesis occurs in microorganisms that obtain their energy by breaking simple chemicals around them. So that is the difference between the chemotrophs and the phototrophs. Now we look at the, the consumers. The consumers are The consumers are the ones that depend directly on the producers. The consumers depend directly on the producers for their energy. Like human beings, we eat plants, and plants are the producers. So, because we depend on plants to get our energy, we are called consumers. Cows depend on plants to get their energy. They have to eat grass to get energy. Therefore, cows are consumers because they depend on producers. Almost all animals, in fact, all animals are consumers because we can't make our own energy. Human beings are part of animals and we can't make our own energy. We can't produce our own food. We have to eat plants to get our own energy. So, because we depend on producers to get our energy or our food, we are all called consumers. Now, decomposers are the last organisms in the trophic level, and they are the ones that depend on the consumers. They degrade the consumers. So the energy from the producer is transferred to the consumer, and from consumer it is transferred to the decomposers. The decomposers are normally the saprophytes, microorganisms that decompose or that make things to decay, like mushroom, like that is fungi and bacteria. Most of them are decomposers. Fungi and bacteria. Fungi, the ones we call saprophytes, they make organisms, both producers and consumers, that die around them to decompose. So that's how they get their own energy. So that these are the levels or the groups in the biotic factor. Now let's look at the mechanism of energy production in producers. How the producers make their own energy or their own food. And we are going to look at photosynthesis. So we are looking at the process of photosynthesis, mechanism of energy production, in producers. How do producers make their own energy? Like the phototrophs, how do they convert the sun energy to get their food? You'll be wondering, how can a plant convert energy from the sun to get carbohydrates? That is what we want to discuss in this session. How plants can attract sunlight energy and convert it to carbohydrates or its own energy. Now, I've said that the process is what we call photosynthesis, the process by which plants uses sunlight energy to make its own food. So, this photosynthesis occurs in two stages. There's a stage we call dark stage and another stage we call light stage. The process of photosynthesis starts with the light stage. The light stage involves the process by which the plants will use a chemical that is called chlorophyll in the leaf of the plants. It is chlorophyll that makes the leaf of a plant to be green. So it's the chlorophyll that makes green plants or plants for their leaves to be green. Without chlorophyll, the leaves of plants may not be green. So because the chlorophyll is colored green. So what the plant does is that when sunlight beats the leaves of plants, the chlorophyll will undergo some reactions. And in that reaction, it will lead to the production of what we call adenosine triphosphates, which we normally abbreviate to ATP, adenosine triphosphates. Adenosine triphosphate or ATP. Now, this is the major thing that is produced in the light stage. The essence of the light stage is to produce ATP. Now, in the dark stage, this ATP is used by the plants and then combined is used to break water molecule, and the water molecule being broken is combined with CO2 in the environment to give carbohydrates. Carbohydrates actually means hydrates of carbon. That is the organic compound carbon. And hydrates is water. When we are talking about hydrates, we are talking about water. So the ATP is used by the plant to break water molecule. And when the water molecule is broken, it makes it easy to react with CO2 or carbon 4 oxide or carbon dioxide in the environment. And when these two things combine, they give the carbohydrates that we now see in the plant. And this happens in the dark stage. That means that photosynthesis occurs both in the day and in the night. In the day, the plant will be busy producing ATP, and in the night, which is the dark time, the plant will be busy using the ATP produced to produce carbohydrates by breaking water molecule and combining it with carbon 4 oxide in the environment to give carbohydrates. So this is what happens in photosynthesis. So in this lesson, we've seen the definition of ecosystem, and we've seen the components of ecosystem, and we also talked about the groups in the biotic factor. We talked in detail about the producer and then the process of energy production in the producers. So I believe that this lesson is very clear. Thank you.